Did you know that MKUltra is not a conspiracy?
The Central Intelligence Agency was trying to find ways to wipe the past from people's minds, to see if they could free them from the conditioning that had been implanted there.
The CIA secretly commissioned a study of communist brainwashing methods at the Cornell University Medical Center. A leader of that study...
That drugs like LSD and others was pretty much passed around to us like it was candy by certain agencies working in or for the government just to see how it'll make us respond.
Then they also did experimentations to using different chemicals to see if you can induce a person to commit a crime or induce him to do that or to do this. Of course, the CIA claimed that it didn't carry it through. The documentation we got was actually that they did that.
And what if I told you that there's evidence for these experiments causing its victims to lose their minds and sometimes even turn into mass murderers? Could this be true?
Okay, that's a little perverse.
Right. He conducted such interrogation studies on Harvard University undergraduates. Theodore Kaczynski, who later became known as the Unabomber, was one of the 22 participants in Murray's study, subjected to several years of interrogations designed to psychologically break the young man.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about today, guys. The experiments of MKUltra, the CIA's mind control program, and the victims they left in their wake. It's Michael here. Thanks for joining me, and let's begin.
But documents clearly show that the CIA was attempting to develop agents over whom they had as much control as possible. Agents who would perform tasks contrary to their own good.
Then we came across the overall project called MKUltra. Its earlier code name was Artichoke, and that included 149 sub-projects.
Launched in 1953, MKUltra was a top secret project aimed at developing techniques for mind control. It was an illegal human experimentation program conducted by the United States Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA, from 1953 to 1973. Allegedly, because who's to say it's still not going on to this day? The investigations leading up to MKUltra's exposure had revealed a range of disturbing activities done by the government. These included the covert administration of psychoactive drugs like LSD, electroshocks, hypnosis, and many other forms of torture on unwitting subjects, including United States and Canadian citizens as well. And if they ran these experiments on us, you know there were plenty more from foreign countries that were part of these tests as well. The experiments conducted under MKUltra were not conducted with the consent of the subjects for the most part, and the subjects were forced to participate without their knowledge or permission. Examples like slipping drugs into their food, adding it to the IVs of patients under care without their knowledge, etc. Imagine going in for an appointment and the drugs they give you includes LSD or dozens of other mind-numbing drugs, a whole bunch of shit that you didn't ask for. The victims of these damned experiments included prisoners, mental health patients, hospitalized veterans, oh of course, and marginalized individuals. They were chosen based on their vulnerability rather than actually volunteering for the experiments, which would have been the correct and legal way to run human tests. They really used and saw people as petri dishes, as a scientist's practice dummy, without any consideration for the victims. That's cold. I couldn't do that. I couldn't be a part of something like that. The existence of MKUltra managed to remain a well-kept secret until 1975, when the Church Committee, a United States Senate task force, began looking in and investigating into the CIA's activities. And what they uncovered was a series of experiments on unwitting subjects that violated both ethical and legal boundaries. It was difficult to obtain the information on this case since the program's activities were covered and compartmentalized in so many layers of secrecy due to ethical and legal concerns, of course. and them wanting no public eyes and government oversight on their project. They didn't want any of that. But mainly, it was due to the destruction of most of the MKUltra documents in 1973, and that's why most of the information on MKUltra is gone right now. This was a direct order by the then Director of Central Intelligence, Richard Helms. Not subtle at all. He waived the internal CIA regulation to destroy these records. This order was not fully allowed, and when I say it absolutely limited the available information and hindered any further investigations into the MKUltra program. There was apparently an off-site location where some of the copies of the financials of a few of the programs in MKUltra were being held. And that's apparently where most of our information on these illegal experiments and tests come from. The CIA had authorized research into substances that could give people amnesia, things that were useful for interrogations, and of course, drugs to alter human behavior and control the mind. MKUltra involved over 100 different types of experiments that were being conducted. The program's extensive reach involved numerous institutions and researchers, with some being unaware of the CIA's involvement, but y'all was still running these tests. The main substance they used to study was LSD. Imagine being dosed with LSD without your knowledge, sent on a trip from which there was no escape. You could be at work, walking home, grocery shopping, or even at the park with your kids, and you could just start panicking and hallucinating, and maybe even start attacking people without knowing what you're actually doing. That is insane, man. The CIA conducted countless such experiments, aiming to discover if LSD could be used as a tool for mind control. They used sleep deprivation to get what they wanted. Subjects were kept awake for days and days on end, pushed to their absolute limits to try and break their will and spirit, just to make them pliable enough to be susceptible to behavior and mind control. Electroshock therapy was used at extreme levels as well, far beyond what was considered safe, and it was used to erase and manipulate memories, often leaving the subjects permanently damaged. Up in Canada, with the Montreal experiments, under the direction of Dr. Ewan Cameron, were experiments aimed to de-pattern individuals, wiping their minds clean before attempting to reprogram them. Techniques included drug-induced comas and repeated audio messages. The creator of the psychic driving concept, which the CIA definitely found interesting. Dr. Cameron was hoping to correct schizophrenia. He attempted to erase existing memories to reprogram the psyche, using a combination of LSD, random paralytic drugs, and electroconvulsive therapy at way higher than normal voltage, 30 to 40 times more voltage than the recommended range. His experiments consisted of putting people in a deep drug-induced coma for weeks, sometimes up to 3 months at a time, while he played recordings and tape loops of noise and simple statements. And these experiments were typically carried out on patients that entered the establishment for minor problems and issues like anxiety disorders and postpartum depression, not super serious mental health issues, and they were still unwittingly put through this, many of whom had ended up suffering permanent damage from his illegal experimentation. A complete betrayal of trust from patient to doctor, and a damn betrayal to his medical license. The CIA's base for a majority of these mind control experiments was Fort Detrick, Maryland, and the efforts to recruit subjects for the experiments was done illegally. Even physical torture was sometimes possible to ask questions and get useful answers. In an operation called Midnight Climax, the CIA set up several brothels, whorehouses, to obtain a selection of men who would be too embarrassed to talk about their sexual habits. The men were dosed with LSD, the brothels were equipped with one-way mirrors, and the sessions were filmed for later viewing and study, stating that some of these subjects were under the effect of LSD for 77 consecutive days straight. The CIA also sought to exploit existing relationships within the scientific community, particularly those formed through Operation Paperclip, which brought Nazi scientists to the United States, a lot of whom were already charged and guilty for war crimes that they committed for the Nazis. and they were just pardoned. These experiments even led to some notable deaths, one of which hit the news, due to the CIA possibly drugging one of their own workers. Early on the 28th of November 1953, Frank Olson, a U.S. Army civilian biochemist and biological weapons researcher, jumped to his death from a hotel room in New York City after suffering a severe reaction to LSD that he apparently consumed as a part of a CIA-led research program. They literally slipped the drug in his food or drink and then watched him lose control.
Covering a span of history such as we are in this report, one can get sidetracked by the so-called glamour and mystery of espionage work, or by the exotic qualities of some drugs. But what you can't lose sight of is what all of this would mean in terms of individual human beings. There would be deaths, there would be long-lasting and harmful effects. The best-known case is that of this man, Frank Olson, a chemist employed by the Army Chemical Corps, who in 1953 was slipped LSD unknowingly at a meeting with CIA officials. Shortly after that, Olson went into severe depression. He ended his life at this New York hotel by diving through a shaded closed window in his 10th floor room. Frank Olson was the first known fatality in the CIA's LSD program.
His own people, man, I don't know. I heard that he was trying to release maybe secret information regarding these illegal experiments or like the things they were up to, but I'm not sure. They apparently stopped him and spiked his drink beforehand to keep him silent. It sounds like it could be true. While the exact number of victims remains uncertain, thousands are estimated to have participated in these experiments. And that's probably just America and Canada alone. Hell, the CIA even collaborated with hella universities and institutions to recruit subjects, and even sometimes to run the actual experiments. Can you believe that?
The CIA secretly commissioned a study of communist brainwashing methods at the Cornell University Medical Center. A leader of that study was Dr. Lawrence Hinkle. He explains first the Russian method of controlling and breaking a person.
Absolutely isolated from everyone else, with one man whose job it is to get you to write the extent to which you are a criminal. In this setting, you can get people to do most anything, do you see? Because you don't have to lay a handle. And by the time you get through and you go up before the judge, the fellow says, "Were you a spy?" He says, "Yes, I was a spy."
They say 44 American colleges and universities, 15 research foundations or chemical pharmaceutical companies like Sandoz, who's now currently known as Novartis, and Eli Lilly and Company, 12 hospitals and clinics, and 3 prisons were known to have participated in MKUltra. I can't believe our schools were running these labs and experiments right under their buildings. Things that go on with enough funding involved. It's honestly ridiculous. A considerable amount of credible circumstantial evidence suggests that Theodore Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber, participated in CIA-sponsored MKUltra experiments conducted at Harvard University.
Okay, that's a little perverse.
Right. He conducted such interrogation studies on Harvard University undergraduates. Theodore Kaczynski, who later became known as the Unabomber, was one of the 22 participants in Murray's study, subjected to several years of interrogations designed to psychologically break the young man.
So why aren't the people who have run these studies under the same interrogation that the soldiers of World War II were under, where we went after the fucking Nazis? We should be going after people who ran these terrible tests and basically created some of society's most prominent and infamous serial killers.
That's you're right, and it's a nice way of looking at it.
From the fall of 1959 through the spring of 1962, what the hell? During World War II, Henry Murray, the lead researcher in the Harvard experiments, served with the Office of Strategic Services, which was a forerunner of the CIA. He applied for a grant funded by the United States Navy, and his Harvard stress experiments strongly resembled those run by the OSS. And beginning at the age of 16, Theodore Kaczynski, or the Unabomber, participated in these experiments, along with 21 undergraduate students How the hell did they just create the Unabomber like that? And how many more of them are out there, yo? God, the revelation of MKUltra just shocked the world. It showed us that our government was involved in the violation of human rights and the ethics of scientific experimentation. Lawsuits followed, but many victims remained in the shadows, especially after the destruction of most of the official documents involved with MKUltra. Many of the people who took part in these experiments will never get brought to justice. They got to continue living their lives and creating families, all while the people they experimented on are probably now suffering until the end of their lives. The legacy of MKUltra lives on, a dark reminder of the lengths that these governments might go in the name of national security. Let me know if you guys think if this type of shit is still going on today. If you feel they actually did shut the program down when they said they were, or if you think they secretly just have it running up still. Leave your comments down below, everyone. Please like and subscribe, and be safe.
The CIA secretly commissioned a study of communist brainwashing methods at the Cornell University Medical Center. A leader of that study was Dr. Lawrence Hinkle. He explains first the Russian method of controlling and breaking a person.
Absolutely isolated from everyone else, with one man whose job it is to get you to write the extent to which you are a criminal. In this setting, you can get people to do most anything, do you see? Because you don't have to lay a handle. And by the time you get through and you go up before the judge, the fellow says, "Were you a spy?" He says, "Yes, I was a spy."
Then they also did experimentations to using different chemicals to see if you can induce a person to commit a crime or induce him to do that or to do this. Of course, the CIA claimed that it didn't carry it through. The documentation we got was actually that they did that.
Okay, that's a little perverse.
Right. He conducted such interrogation studies on Harvard University undergraduates. Theodore Kaczynski, who later became known as the Unabomber, was one of the 22 participants in Murray's study, subjected to several years of interrogations designed to psychologically break the young man.
So why aren't the people who have run these studies under the same interrogation that the soldiers of World War II were under, where we went after the fucking Nazis? We should be going after people who ran these terrible tests and basically created some of society's most prominent and infamous serial killers.
That's you're right, and it's a nice way of looking at it.